Let's do interior defensive line. So defensive tackles here. We have 2 first-team spots for 3 all-world aliens, and we have to make a decision of who we are going to leave out and have in that second tier. I will ask you first as the guest of the show here. Who do you have as your first-team defensive tackle duo midway through the season?
My duo is Dexter Lawrence and Cam Hayward.
Oh, that's what I got too. Same thing.
And I just want to point out for people on Dexter Lawrence specifically that I can't think. I was trying to play around this morning and look around and go, am I misremembering someone? Someone who's rushed the passer as a true nose at the level he's rushing at, which is similar figures, similar benchmarks to being like a truly elite edge rusher, or, a classic 3-tech Sap, Donald, someone like that. He is rushing an awful lot from a congested situation where he's head up or just slightly off from the center and he's got a guard right there. And everyone in the world knows, for as good as the edge defenders have been at times up and down for the Giants this season, that we're going to have to double this guy off the ball. And he is just obliterating people every single week. And the thing that stands out with him even more when you dig through kind of the wider parameters of what's happening is there is no player right now, for as much is allocated to some of the great edge defenders in the league, who is just kind of completely stripping down the offensive operation off the ball as consistently. Whether it's just kind of blowing past someone, so then you mess up where a sweep or an end around or something that kind of moves in the backfield. He is just over and over again disrupting every single thing an offense wants to do, even if he isn't actually the guy who winds up getting the pressure or the hit or the TFL, whatever it is that would actually count up in the stats. He's kind of got this extra thing going on where so much attention is paid to him, and even with the attention, he's just destroying everything an offense is trying to do operationally every week.
Yeah, I have these 2 guys the same because they're a little bit more well-rounded than the third player, which is Chris Jones, which is who we're going to talk about sort of next as we talk about the second-team guys. But, yeah, I mean, when you look at Cam Hayward and Dexter Lawrence, their numbers are so high for both run defense and pass rushing categories. Cam Hayward, 89.7 pass rush grade. That's second in the league. Sacks, he's tied for 14th. Pressures, 6th. Win percentage, first. Run defense grade, first. This is among defensive tackles, by the way. Solo stops in the run game, second. So, I mean, this guy is basically top 5 in every single category, pass rushing and run defending when it comes to Cam Hayward. And then Dexter Lawrence, pass rush grade, 83.7. That's 4th in the NFL. Sacks, he's first. Pressures, he's 3rd. Win percentage, he's 11th, so a little bit lower. Run defense grade, he's 2nd. Solo stops, he's got 10. That's 22nd. So, to me, Dexter Lawrence is also in that spot where, like Hayward, he is just affecting the game at such a high level in both areas. If I had to choose a 1 and a 2, I would go with Cam Hayward as the number 1 guy right now. But Lawrence is right there because his floor is so high. I mean, his impact on all 3 downs is felt every single week. I mean, I know he struggled a little bit this past week, but he is such a high-impact player. And you mentioned somebody who is aligned in a unique spot where he's able to have that sort of impact. And I think that that's really important. So I have those 2 guys as my first team players. And then my second team players, I made you go first, so I'll go second here for the second team. Chris Jones is the obvious one for defensive tackle. If you're not going to put him on the first team, you got to put him next on the second team, because I think there is certainly a debate for him to be a first team All-Pro midway through the season, because 91.1 pass rush grade for defensive tackles, that's first. For sacks, he's tied for 14th. Pressures, he's second. Win percentage, he's second. But then you get into some run defense stuff. 62.5 run defense grade, that's 45th of defensive tackles. And then 8 solo stops, that's 40th. So he's just not the run defender that those other guys are. Now, I'm not saying that to take anything away from Chris Jones. It's just those other 2 guys are doing a little bit more in the run game. And so I think that they deserve the nod with Chris Jones kind of getting that second team honor here. The next player, there's a lot of different guys that I think you could go with. Ultimately, I did go with Jalen Carter because I still think that Carter is, what he does as a pass rusher is still so highly impactful, and his talent is so evident every single time that they play, that his high pass rush grade, I believe he's got just south of a 90.0 pass rushing grade on the season. To me, that was too much to sort of pass up. There are a couple of guys that have a little bit higher floors. Zach Allen, I thought about here, but he's a big volume guy. Like, he's played over 540 snaps this season, which is crazy. No other defensive tackle has played over, I think, 470. So he's an Iron Man on the defensive line. I want to give him recognition, but with all that volume, the stats and the effectiveness, I think, has been a little bit lower outside of those splash plays with how much he has played. So I thought about Zach Allen here. Quinn's sort of coming along a little bit, but I didn't think of him too much. I think Jalen is probably just that next guy that I would go to, because there's some other studs, but like, DeForest Buckner's missed some time. Vita Vea's missed some time. Those are guys who maybe if they would have played the full the full early part of the season, I could have considered them there. But ultimately, I went with Jalen Carter to pair with Chris Jones. Who did you have on your second team for defensive tackle?
I went with Allen. I think your Carter point is probably the correct one. If you were just picking one player to start for your team, or one rep for your life, you would go with Jalen Carter, because I do think he can win in a number of different ways, and you can do different things with your front just because of how dominant he is. With Allen, I give him credit for having, the stats have been juiced slightly, as you mentioned, because he's playing so many snaps, but he is playing those snaps. So it's basically playing a full more game than everyone else in the league, perhaps two, based on how you rotate your defensive front. So I give him credit for that. And I just think when you watch them, they get an awful lot of credit just as a collective, right? Because they do so many different things, and it just doesn't feel like there's many stars in that defense when you go through. There's a bunch of undrafted linebackers, safeties from all over the place. They've rolled through all these different edge defenders, but they really tee everything they do off, particularly in the run game, where he's not a very good run defender. It really is boom or bust. But they do ask him within that to just kind of let it fly every single rep and to just drive downhill, throw his body into things to create voids for other people. So I do think he's doing what's asked of him, even though he doesn't actually like stand up and get off things as well as you would maybe like to see, as well as Jalen Carter does. And I'm just going to give him a slight bit of extra credit for just the sheer volume of forced negative plays, all the run stops, the TFLs, the production in pass rush win rate, all the different pressures this season, and then doing so as kind of the focal point of one of the best defenses in the league that we just didn't think would necessarily be that high up there to begin the season. So I'm giving it more of a cap tip for doing it at such a high volume over and over again.
I think Calais Campbell, I think, is playing well for the Miami Dolphins. He's somebody that I sort of consider. Poona Ford is actually playing really well on that Chargers defensive line as well. So I kind of thought about him, not necessarily to the level of picking him over as Zach Allen, but somebody that I sort of wanted to shout out for those two guys. Not really considered given the players that we have for second team here, but players who are having a good year that I wanted to recognize there. Let's move on to edge rusher next. My first team edge rusher, I have TJ Watt as one of the spots, and then I have Trey Hendrickson as the other. Now, I think that there are a handful of choices that you could go with here at edge rusher. Ultimately, I go with TJ Watt because I think it's better. It's been a better year for him in run defense. Obviously, I think that he is a good pass runner, but he has been a damn near elite run defender this season. Pass rush has been better than it was, I think, over the last couple of seasons. But the forced fumbles, too, man. I mean, leading the league in forced fumbles is huge. I don't think that's as much of luck, certainly when you have as many as TJ Watt does. He's got 4 this season. Sometimes you could say, like, all right, well, I'm just, I'm hitting a guy a certain way. He didn't have the ball really secured. It's sort of a lucky forced fumble. I don't think that TJ Watt has a lot of, lucky forced fumbles. He is the one who is hitting you a certain way. He trains a certain way. He's always going for the ball. So I give him credit for a lot of the forced fumbles that he has. So that's a major game-changing part of the game. It's not just, as if a sack wasn't impactful enough. He can get those strip sacks and change everything for you. He's already been doing that midway through the year. So I think TJ Watt is going to be on this list. And then Trey Hendrickson leads the NFL in sacks, had 4 more sacks this past week. And the thing that impresses me the most about Hendrickson, who maybe there are a couple of players that their pass rush win percentage is a little bit higher, maybe the pressure numbers a little bit higher, or even the run defense grade might be a little bit higher. With Hendrickson, I have to think about what the Bengals were through the first, I would say, 4 to 5 weeks of the season, where it was literally just him. That was it. And nobody else in the defensive line was really stepping up. It was just him. And I don't say that just to say this is why he had the volume stats. I say that his extremely high-level impact was not only important, but demanded if the Bengals were going to stay in games at all whatsoever in the earlier parts of the season. I think how he was able to be the presence on that defense through the first 4 to 5 weeks sort of reminded this team of like what they could be, and they have since followed suit. And I think the Bengals are a much better version of themselves, certainly on the defensive side of the ball now than they were to start the season. I think Hendrickson's motor and production and takeover ability is a big reason why. So some X factors kind of played into this one with him over a couple of guys, but ultimately I got TJ Watt and Trey Hendrickson as my 2 All-Pros midway through the season. What about you?
Yeah, I love the Hendrickson pick. I've got TJ Watt as well, and I think the point you made is really interesting. He might be one of the most fascinating like player development guys we've had in a long time in the league, and partly I think this is to do with the fact he plays in a stacked defensive line, right? So he's got Hayward there, there's Herbig, there's Highsmith, but him just deciding at this point of his career that I have one move and I'm going to hit it every single time. And so when you go and dig through some of the figures or you watch every game, you'll say, hey, his pass rush win rate doesn't stack up with the elite guys. His pressure numbers per snap are not always up there with the elite guys. But what he's decided to do by just being a pure dip and rip around the arc, maybe 2 or 3 different moves over the course of a game, but it's just one go-to thing. First step quickness, dip under, and try and explode back to the quarterback. And he knows if I can hit that 3 or 4 times, those are quick wins. And they're not just quick wins, 2.5 seconds. They are immediately at the snap wins, which allows me then to attack the ball. So to your point that you don't think they're lucky, I don't think they're lucky at all. I think it's a design thing where he said, I'd rather make game-changing plays that win football games than have the highest pressure rate in the league, where maybe I'm getting unbelievable stat lines, but not necessarily deciding games on my own along the defensive line. So I have TJ Watt in there for the same reason that you said, that just the volume of game-changing plays, while maybe not the down-to-down impact of some of the other guys, when he does get home, he closes in a different way to everyone else in the league. So I have him first. And then the rest of it is so difficult. I think the Hendrickson points you made were really good. You can go with Garrett, Bosa, Jonathan Greenard is having an unbelievable season, but I think he gets a bit more scheme help than everyone else. Hutchinson, I know, has been injured and missed 3 weeks, but his numbers are still as good or better than anyone, and he's missed 3 weeks of the year, so that's wild. And then I think Khalil Mack deserves a shout out too, because the Chargers have become the best run defense in the NFL, and it's been a real collective effort, but he's been by far their best on the ball defensive lineman, playing truly as like an in-line heavy end at this stage in his career and still offering some juice as a pass rusher as well. So I wanted to give Khalil Mack a shout out for that. I am going back and forth on who to pick here, but you kind of convinced me with the Hendrickson point. That I think he's probably had more subtle down weeks than some of the other contenders that I talked about there, but what he's had to overcome with what is around him, he's working with such a subpar group and has done for much of the season compared to everyone else. So for him to be having kind of drive-changing, game impact type plays regularly, and then have kind of the underlying win rate production where he is just winning one-on-one all the time, and some of the pressure totals as well, I think I'm going to have to agree with you and go with Trey Hendrickson.
Well, for my second team, you mentioned that you wanted to give Khalil Mack a shout out. I'm gonna give Khalil Mack the nod, and the two players that I have here on the second team for edge rushers, one is Myles Garrett. I cannot keep him off of this list. He has a 26.3% pass rush win percentage this season. It's stupid. So even if you want to say, all right, well, Myles Garrett hasn't quite been the run defender that some of these other edge rushers have, that's fine. He has been the pass rusher. The only pass rusher at the edge spot that has a higher pass rushing grade and higher pass rush win percentage than Myles Garrett is Aiden Hutchinson, who obviously would be in this list had he not been hurt. I mean, if you wanted to say midway through the season that you're giving one of these to Aiden Hutchinson, you absolutely could, and I wouldn't really fault you for it. Obviously, with him not playing the rest of the season, he's not going to win it in the end, but certainly the nod there at how he has been playing. Myles Garrett is the next guy, and he is playing at an insane level as well. So if Hendrickson wasn't in the picture this year, we'd be talking about Myles Garrett as a defensive player of the year once again because of what he is doing as a pass rusher. So I think he has to be here at one of these second team all-pro spots. And then I'll give Khalil Mack the next one because elite 92.1 run defense grade already this season. You talked about what the Chargers defensive line has been this year. And I mentioned Poona Ford is somebody who is a shout-out type of a player for the defensive line, but so is Khalil Mack, ageless in how he is able to anchor and defend the run, set the edge. So he is still good as a pass rusher, 14.3 pass rush win percentage, but it's really what the elite run defender that Khalil Mack has been this year, which is what they are asking him to do primarily along that defensive line. line that tells me, hey, you're not only doing the job that they're asking you to do, you are doing it well, and you're giving him a little bit of that extra with how you are pass rushing, even over the age of 30, which we don't see a lot from these edge rushers, even the most talented ones. So to me, I think TJ Watt, Trey Hendrickson get that first team, those two first team spots, and then I have Myles Garrett and Khalil Mack getting the second team All-Pro spots here. What about you?
Yeah, I'm going to give Myles Garrett for all the reasons you mentioned. I feel like I've almost maybe given him a slight demerit because I'm just used to it being so outrageously superhuman that when he is simply just all-time great for 8 weeks, I'm like, well, maybe I knock him down and put Trey Hendrickson above him. I mean, he's been flat out unblockable multiple weeks this season. So I definitely have Garrett on there. And I think I'll give the nod slightly to Bosa ahead of Mack. I think Mack has probably been more consistent on a week-to-week basis. And I do think he's been dinged slightly, as you mentioned. Some of the alignments they use him in, if they just shuffled him away from the formation more, they'd make their team worse, and they'd probably boost his individual figures for the season. But he's playing, as you mentioned, the role that he's asked to play at the highest possible level while still giving you plenty of sizzle as a pass rusher when it's demanded and it's obvious pass rush downs. But I just think Bosa, for raw production, his run defense ticking up ever so slightly when it's not always been the strongest element of his game for a group that's not been the strongest for multiple seasons now. I'm going to lean ever so slightly towards Bosa.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below. So if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can come one today.